Hey everyone, so I just wanted to give an update on my life in relation to chemotherapy, recovery and all that, because some things have happened to me recently and there are two major things that I want to talk about. A relapse scare that I'm going through right now and some chemo brain thoughts and revelations. So the first thing is that I felt like a lump in my neck maybe about a week and a half ago, and I felt it here. And it was really scary to feel that. I felt it in the morning before my placement and the entire day. It was really hard to concentrate. I felt very shaky and just generally emotional. But then when I got home, I realized that my boyfriend was sick and that he got sick from something in the office. Someone was sick and it had passed it on to him. And so in that moment, I was really scared. I felt really emotional. I cried. But then I saw that my boyfriend was sick and I was thinking, well, maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just an inflamed gland in the neck because my boyfriend is sick, which must mean I've probably gotten sick as well. At the time, I was calming myself down because I had just gone to the hematologist, oncologist 3 weeks prior. And I was thinking there's no way that something could grow in that short a time, but of course something could. And I still haven't had this checked yet. And it's because I have gotten sick. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice, but I got really sick. It just took me a few days before I really showed that I was sick. I suppose my glands, my lymph nodes probably inflamed earlier as they were trying to fight off the infection or the virus or whatever my boyfriend was carrying. And so because I haven't gotten anything checked, I'm still really scared about it. I haven't been actively feeling my neck recently because sometimes I do feel it and it just feels generally inflamed, generally sore and tender. Yesterday it was so hard, even just to swallow water, just to do anything with my neck. It was really painful. And today it still is painful, but it's more about my nose and my sinuses feeling all gross. So I know that I'm definitely sick. Chances are I don't have cancer, but for the last maybe week and a half, I've just been really worried about that and thinking about whether or not I should go to the doctor now or if I should wait a period until I'm feeling better and then feel for my neck and decide then if I should get an extra checkup. I'm going to see my doctor in I think February, so it's only maybe 2-3 months. It was only about a 4-month gap between my last check and this check that's going to come up, so it's not a huge period of time, but of course my mind starts going crazy and I think, what if I do have cancer? I can't wait that long to get it checked out. But given my current state, given the fact that lymph nodes are normally meant to swell in a healthy way to protect you, I feel like there's enough logic to hold me back because, people could argue you should just go get things checked. But last time, I think it was 2016, October, November, I was really worried that I had relapsed. I made a video about it because my feet were really, really itchy, and that was my main symptom that I had cancer when I had it last time. And so I was really, really worried, but the person told me to go get a blood test. It was okay, and to wait a 2-week period. If I was still having that symptom after 2 weeks, then they would do extra scans and extra checks. And so I'm kind of following that same logic. I haven't had the blood test, but I am thinking of waiting the 2-week period. Also waiting to see what happens when my sickness leaves me, so that way my neck is easier to feel and touch and figure out what's going on there. But I don't want to go to the doctors and then, go through that awful experience of being in the hospital again. It's already hard enough to go there for checkups and just feel my body respond in fear and anxiety and just really in sadness. I think that's the main bodily response I get when I go to the hospital. It's just sadness, especially when I'm going to the place where I have to get my checkups or I'm walking past the chemotherapy room. And I don't want to expose my body to any more scans. I don't want to do any more CT scans and PET scans in particular unless I have to, because, you are exposing your body to radioactive nuclear stuff. I don't know what the proper term is, but there are risks involved with that. Naturally, it's not super severe. It's worth getting the scans done. But, I've had doctors come up to me and check my history, check that I need to get this scan done because they didn't want to put such a young person through that scan multiple times for no reason. And so that also freaks me out when I think about going and getting this neck thing tested, because what if they do want those scans? What if they decide to get that kind of stuff done and I'm exposing myself more to, potentially getting cancer in the future because I am exposed to these radioactive materials and chemicals and all that garbage. So I just want to make sure that it's worth freaking out about. So I've just been freaking out on my own for the last week and a half. But thankfully it hasn't been too painful. In the last video that I made, I was talking about how I came to this realization that I had been still in survival mode, effectively. I wasn't really engaging with life fully. I was still constantly distracting myself and not really allowing my thoughts to be free. I wasn't able to be productive or relax because my go-to activity was a distraction-based activity. It was a skill that I developed and honed while I had cancer and I was going through chemotherapy. It helped me keep distracted. My go-to thing to do, it became so go-to that I wasn't even conscious that I was doing it anymore, but was to distract my mind, distract my brain. I talk about always having an audiobook on, always listening to podcasts, watching lots of YouTube videos, video games, even books, anything that took me out of present day and to fill my thoughts with someone else's thoughts. And so I didn't have to think too deeply on what was going on in my own life because I am a very reflective person in nature and I had to, stop that for a period of time. And so I talked about that in my last video and you can watch that if you'd like. I actually want to make another one kind of delving further into this idea because it's been a big revelation for me and I'm still discovering more aspects of it. And so it's been hard because for the last couple of weeks to months, I've been really, working on being more productive, being more in touch with my surroundings, being more in touch with my thoughts, trying to be more mindful instead of always distracting myself to manage anxious thoughts. And when I felt this thing in my neck, I felt my body shut down and I didn't know what was going to happen to me. But I think because I'm so conscious that I had been doing this for so long and that it was a coping skill and it is very valuable in its own way, I decided in a really conscious way, it's okay. Listen to those audiobooks, listen to those podcasts hour after hour if that's what you need to get through this next 2-week period until you can actually get things checked or the swelling has gone away and you're no longer worried that it's cancerous. And so even though I don't want to always be doing stuff like that, like always distracting myself as opposed to doing things that make me happy and are more productive, I found it so helpful in that moment to decide for myself, you know what, you need this. Go and distract yourself. Go into survival mode. This is why you need this mode. It's for periods like this. And so even though I don't like myself doing that activity, I was really happy that I could choose it in that moment. And I think that's a big part of just being human in general and feeling okay with what happens to us is making sure that we get some choice, some element of choice while doing it. And so it was okay for me to be in this kind of hazy last week and a half and to be filling my days and my hours with very distracting kind of activities because I need it to survive or until I'm no longer worried about this thing in my neck. So the inflammation in my neck and my general sickness have been the things most on my mind. But recently I was doing something for a placement and someone was asking me all these different questions about how I was going and it started off okay. But then as I went on, I realized how I had stumbled over some words or that I was blanking as I was looking at the page. And I didn't think I was that anxious going into it. But then once the assessment started, I just suddenly felt more and more anxious and I felt like my face was twitching in weird ways, the way that a face twitches when it's anxious. I felt like my voice was wavering a little bit when I was speaking, and I just suddenly became so self-conscious, and I'm not someone to normally feel that, so it really bothers me when that feeling comes over me. And I realized that whenever I start to blank or I'm speaking spontaneously and I can hear myself stuffing up, and I know part of it is chemo brain. I know that I still have some mild damage from that, but it really is minimal. If I have slept well, if I have, some coffee, if I've been eating well, I don't notice it at all. But if I'm stressed or if I'm anxious or if I haven't been sleeping well or taking care of myself, I feel my brain shut down and blank a lot more than it really would have in the past. And so when I finished that assessment, I got really angry at myself for getting so anxious because I had actually exacerbated the problem. I don't think the chemo brain was really affecting me that much, or at least if it was maybe only 1 or 2 times early on in the assessment, and they're little stuff ups that you can fix easily. Like, no one would think twice about them. But because I connect any stuff up that I make to chemo brain, I just felt myself get worse and worse. And as my anxiety rose, I started to stumble more. I felt my mind kind of shut down and shrink. And I know people describe that experience if they're really anxious. You don't need to have gone through chemotherapy to experience that feeling of everything slowly shutting down. But I guess for me, I had never had that experience before chemotherapy. So anytime that I experience something that's negative, out of the norm, and it has to do with my mind and my thinking abilities, I automatically go to chemo brain. If I start thinking about chemo brain and how it's holding me back, I start thinking about cancer. I start thinking of relapse. I start thinking of how I'm not reaching my potential, and all these stupid thoughts just come to my mind. So as far as I know, the assessment went well. I think it went well, and the person seemed pretty pleased with how it went, but I felt myself get more and more flustered, and I just started thinking about what they were thinking of me, and they were probably thinking, oh, like, what a poor little anxious girl. She's just, she doesn't realize that she's doing really well. I don't know why she's so anxious, blah, blah, blah. And then when you start thinking of those things, I'm like, I don't want pity. Like, I know that I'm doing well so far. I just don't know why it's so hard for me to speak. Like, I do believe what I'm saying, but it sounds like I'm uncertain about what I'm saying, and I don't know, it just escalated for me mentally, and I had been thinking about it for days after. On the drive back home, I kept thinking about it and kind of talking it through, and I was just so frustrated that I presented a version of myself that wasn't me, or I didn't feel like it was me. And ultimately, why does that matter? Who cares what that person thinks of who I am? And the person that I presented was not a bad person in any way, but it's just when there's that kind of inconsistency that's really frustrating. And to me, that always emotionally hurts me, because the most emotionally difficult symptom of chemotherapy was chemo brain and the way that it impacted my identity. I felt like I was a different person. I felt like I wasn't really able to be who I was before, or at least aspects of me had been broken. And it was such a simple assessment. It was such a simple moment. I was just there to talk about my progress, how I think that I was demonstrating certain competencies and stuff like that. And I just felt myself shut down, and then all those thoughts about chemo brain and potential, about how they were viewing me, about my own identity. Is this the kind of person that I am or that I present? And everything just went downhill. I've mostly let go of it. I know part of it is the process of recovery, especially for those more emotionally difficult symptoms that we deal with chemotherapy, and those delayed side effects or long-term side effects. I know part of it is just being young and finding yourself, and finding your own rhythm in new ventures. Like, I know all that, but it just really hurt at the time. I just was really angry at myself. And so I've been just working on letting that go, letting that anger go. And it was just one moment in time. And at the end of the day, the thing that really stuffed me over in that moment was my rising anxiety, not chemo brain. For me, the perfect analogy for this that I've been exploring, that I feel like best sums up my experience with chemo brain and how to approach it going forward, is chemo brain and chemotherapy used to throw me to the ground. It used to grab me and throw me, and I would stumble and fall and hurt myself. But over time, it doesn't have that much power, and I've gone past it. But it can still trip me up. But the thing is, you don't have to fall from a trip. A lot of people can trip and just hold themselves back up, and I've done that so many times where I would trip or stumble over a word, but then I just, go back into conversation, just make a joke about it, or just move on, and it's no big deal. But in that moment, I let the trip turn into a fall, and I could have held on to something. And so in the future, I'm just going to focus on that. I might not be able to stop myself tripping over every now and again, and yes, maybe it is mostly because of chemotherapy, mostly because of those long-term side effects that trip me up, but I can hold myself up even in those situations. And I like that analogy too, because when I am taking care of myself and I have slept well or had my coffee, you're more alert, you're more prepared to act. Even if you did physically trip, you are able to probably catch yourself from falling. But if you have all these things like burdens on you, you haven't slept well, you're tired, you're stressed, you're less likely to be able to react in that moment in a more seamless way. You're more likely to be caught off guard and fall. And so, yeah, that's just the way that I'm looking at it at the moment. I'll stop the video here, but thank you for watching. Please leave your thoughts down below if you have any after watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay,